This is Natalie St. Fleur's Real Portfolio. My philosophy of education is the following. I believe education is all about the exchange of ideas and knowledge. I believe the purpose of education is to advance society. But in order for education to do that, it must be accessible and inclusive. We must hear from all different voices that make up the society. In that way, society is fluid and static and can adapt to new changes and new challenges. I also believe that inclusive education and accessible education is the foundation for a healthy and happy society. So if you kind of think of society as a mansion with a lot of rooms that offer many different opportunities, but those opportunities are closed behind locked doors, having a quality education is kind of like having a master key. And if you have a master key, you can access opportunities behind almost every locked door. But if you don't have a quality education, you may have a key that can open up some rooms, but not all. And watching other people get in and being able to access those opportunities can lead to frustration and people coming up with other ways of accessing those opportunities not through traditional means. So it's so crucial that we are able to provide everyone with that master key, and so people can reach their full potential and contribute to society in a positive way. Respect. In my classroom, respect is really about acknowledging student and family voice, also acknowledging what I need, and acknowledging personal failures. My evidence for that happened a few weeks ago. I was giving a Unit 6 test. It was scheduled for a Friday, and the day before, students were working on test review. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there that day for the review because I had a meeting, but I set it up so that students could work using their Chromes and study using a playlist where they can access videos and extra practice. The next day, I was meeting up with students during my office hours, and the students were expressing to me how unprepared they felt for this test. So, inquiring more, I found out that the substitute didn't give them access to the Chromes, which really kind of cut down on that review day and the effectiveness of it. And I was all ready to go with this test and issue the test and everything, and so I said, I can't do this without really hearing their voice. And in first period, what I did was I quickly made up a poll right at the bell, and the poll asked them if they felt ready for the test. And I've done this before, and usually I get about maybe 30 to 40% of students who say they aren't ready, and a lot of that is just test anxiety. But this time it was really significant, about 80%, and this happened in each class. And then I did a follow-up poll, which gave them the opportunity to take the test that day, which was a Friday, or the next school day, which would be on a Monday. And I talked about kind of the risks of taking a test on a Monday because over the weekend, it's up to them to study, and I won't be there to remind them to study. But despite that, in all classes, the overwhelming majority voted for taking the test on Monday. And I think allowing them that voice and that space to say, hey, I'm not ready and I want to do more, was a really great opportunity to show them respect. And they spent that Friday doing the test review they should have done on Thursday. And I was also there to help them. And they were just so productive that day. It was a wonderful thing. In terms of education, I've always loved learning, and I think that's why I got into teaching. And I believe this profession allows you to learn so much. So I've already learned so much from my students and my families. And I hope my students have learned something from me as well. Not just about the content, but also kind of about aspects like mindset. So one evidence of teaching both mindset and content was in my long division lesson. I was a bit nervous because I know this requires multiple steps. This is very tedious. And I know some students kind of shy away from doing it. So that morning I was like, how can I present this to them in a way that they will remain engaged? And I started thinking long division requires tenacity. And when I think of tenacity, I always just think of pit bulls because they're just such tenacious creatures. So a few days before, one of my students was talking about his pit bulls. So I shoot him a quick email and I'm like, hey, can you send me a picture of your pit bull that I can use in today's lesson? And he's proud of his dog, so he totally did it. It was great. And I started the lesson by talking about the relationship between long division and pit bulls and what they have to do with one another. And I told them, like, in order to do long division, you must be tenacious. It's a tedious process, and you kind of need to be like a pit bull. And incorporating this really picked up the students' engagement. Students who normally slack off when things are tedious worked all the way through, even with some complaints, but they still worked all the way through. It was great. And this was particularly great for the student who owned the dog. He has ADHD, and he's a student who really struggles with procedures like that require multiple steps. But he was so engaged. It was wonderful. In terms of supporting their skills and their content, we also provided this learning tool during the lesson where it allows students to keep track of the multiple steps of long division. And this tool is also offered to RSP students and students with 504 plans as an aid during assessments. And I found this tool to be very effective. So it's an example of both mindset and teaching skills. Advocate. When I think of an advocate, I think of avocat, which is a French word for lawyer. And a lawyer is someone who defends or fights for another person. But I really want students to have self-advocacy. And my evidence for that is this homework quiz, homework center policy that I started in my class in the beginning of the semester. And the way that this policy works, normally for 9th and 10th graders, which is what I mostly teach, if they do not turn in homework, they will be reported for homework center, which is sort of this after-school detention. So with this policy, instead of going around checking homework, I told them the purpose of homework is for them to practice and keep abreast of, like, or keep in mind what they learned the day before. And so students were kind of not so excited about the policy, but it shortly took off, and they really seemed to enjoy it because they'd come in, they would take their homework quiz as soon as they came in. Any student who did not pass showed that they'd not mastered the material, and so they would either have to come and see me at lunch or after school, and they would need to prove to me that they understood the material and they knew what their mistake was on the homework quiz. And so it really made them keep track of what their mistakes were and how they could fix them. So at first I really had to be on top of it and making sure that students came in, but the cool thing was, shortly after we started this policy, the students really seemed to enjoy it, and they were coming in on their own without me even requesting them at lunch and after school, proving to me what they know and what they're identifying their mistakes. And so now they're doing it on their own, and they're really self-advocating for the things that they need in the classroom. And the other cool thing about this policy was another student requested that the homework center that they served be served with me so that they could get the help even if they didn't show up at lunch and after school, and that has been a wonderful thing. Finally, lead. I believe the role of a leader is to bring a team together to achieve a common goal. And one of my roles at school is as an advisor to 14 sophomore girls. There's kind of like two groups of girls that don't get along very well. And I was really concerned because we're supposed to be as a family in our advisory. And so I started this garden project, and it was kind of based on what students had already expressed their interest in the environment and in parks and in beautification. So we started this garden project, students paired off, and they planted a plant. And throughout the week, they had to take care of the plants, like I wasn't going to take care of them. So it really allowed them to collaborate in ways that they hadn't collaborated before. And now you had girls who really didn't speak, taking care of each other's plants. And it kind of brought us together. And here's two of our plants early on, our carrots on the left, and there's some peppers on the right. Sad to say, some of the plants did not survive, but our peppers are still good. So that is wonderful. Thank you very much for your time.